think from an engineering perspective, it really was about discovery and design. As I was thinking about this, you think about the customer challenges, a lot of changing networks. Customers are looking at rebalancing. They're trying to understand their new requirements, bouncing that off of what they have their network models built to achieve. And that's kind of where our engineering team really felt that this last year, where we had more data, we had more unknowns that came into the picture, and we had to run a lot of iterations. And that was where we became more consultative. A lot of times in supply chain engineering, it's a solving process. We get requirements, we have certain inputs, and we're able to optimize. And this year it was really more about a very creative, engaging process with our customers to try to figure out what was the right answer as we kind of look toward the unknowns. We have longstanding customers that are kind of our essential providers, right? And these were the customers that we saw surges in. And we had to really sense and respond on that. And that was kind of the proactive aspect of it that's positive when you go through some kind of disruption like this. If you take a look at what took place with some other customers, some of them new customers, they were in a much different scenario where they might be shrinking. So if you were in the retail brick and mortar type side of things, more retail specific goods that were not e-commerce centric, you were shipping into actual stores. These customers are really trying to figure out how do they fulfill orders in the future versus the ones growing were figuring out how do we flex to meet this new spike in demand. I think you definitely saw a dramatic change in spending from what we saw from end customers, and you saw a tremendous pickup of spending and activity around goods. You had to think outside the box a little bit at periods of time too, with some of our customers, because the growth came on so rapidly and so fast. How could you meet that demand requirement when you had issues with capacity or labor, or how are you able to put things in place? And I tell you, that's a differentiation factor I think that NFI brings, is our ability to sense that, adapt to it, and bring assets, people, and process and technology to the table. So that was a big differentiator, I think, this year. I think dynamic requirements. So if I go back to the first kind of conversation of unknowns, what you were planning for in December through February is dramatically different what you were planning for in August. That tight window of changing requirements. And what we see on the design side is typically our cycles can be several weeks, sometimes months, as we go into implementing networks. As we were going through those cycles, we would see very large changes in that, trying to understand what's the best way to handle new requirements coming in. All these different requirements coming in were all showing how they were responding to their new customer expectations. And in some cases, that's where we would find barriers or gaps or constraints. And that's where we had to bring, I think, creative solutions to the table for customers. NFI would bring real estate, whether we brought labor, whether we brought our technology. In some cases, our customers, for example, their technology, they had not renewed their technology enough to be able to handle some of the new requirements. So if you were going to try to put in place some automation to help support some of the labor at sites, they didn't have the infrastructure, or they don't have the planning systems to be able to do that. So you have an opportunity to have a lot wider discussion with customers at this point versus maybe before they wanted to have more of that be in-house. So those are some things that kind of changed as we went along. Our approach has always been, we're always going to tell you what we can do. That's the attitude we have here at NFI, and really it's part of that bleed blue culture. We're going to help you get to that next step. So typically what we'll do is we'll break it up into phases. We'll try to understand data to figure out the right next step. And that's really how we manage some of the customer change that we saw during the pandemic, or really during this dramatic change. Here's the next step to get us the right direction. And sometimes it's not a full linear path. Sometimes you're going to get somewhere to get an immediate need done, and they may change strategic direction. So you got to be a little nimble. But the other thing I would mention that was a pretty significant challenge this year versus other years, I don't think it's going to change, is the sheer amount of data. And we were able to respond with that, with new partners, new technology, being data driven, right? As a company, as a new strategy. And that's really honestly where the industry's going. And it's we're feeling that more data that started back in 2018, that's coming into our engineering for design consideration now. So for example, we had many deals where we had over 2 million records given to us for data to try to optimize the solution around. So I don't see that changing. I think what we're going to do is continue to evolve and take that leading step that we're in now and just have better tools to be able to continue to support our customers there. One of our biggest value proposition is capacity. If you think about our people, you think about our assets, you think about our technology, our ability to create and share assets across customers, that's a huge value proposition we bring to the table. And I think at any given time, I've been in 3PL over 20 years. It was a distinguishing advantage for NFI before. During this last year with the pandemic, it came to the forefront of, frankly, why we, I think, had as much success as we did in the sales side. because we've got that strong value proposition, right? We're able to quickly enable and implement new facilities on the warehousing side in weeks because we've got the real estate capacity. On the fleet side, we could sense and respond changes between different customer vertical markets and share assets proactively. And engineering, our role in that is really kind of taking a look at the data and seeing those things emerge. So I really think it's a capacity thing. I think also we talked a bit about IT. A lot of our customers are on multi-year journeys to renew their IT. And this year, a lot more complexity came into play around what they have to do in the next 2 to 3 years to redefine who they are. Sometimes those infrastructures and those IT systems, they're not in place to be able to be successful. And you may have a multi-year challenge. A lot of our conversation is we can instantly give that upgrading and that renewal to a customer just by coming to NFI with our ability to bring in Manhattan, our ability to bring in some of our automation partners and really get people up to speed. That was a big value proposition conversation. I think the automation piece about empowering people is another big one. I mean, one thing we did, I think very successfully was experiment, was to drive our innovations. So we learned about these technologies and had the right partners. And I think that was instrumental too, is really it was a team approach, our ability to bring the right partners to the table and help vet business cases with our customers. In many cases, our customers haven't started down this path yet. So we're able to share with them our insight, our knowledge, our best practices around certain automation. So we can try to enable the labor that we do have to be a lot more meaningful and safer environment, a lot more productive. So that was a real big process throughout the year that I think is just going to continue to make NFI a unique value for customers.